There are moments in sports that seem impossible. Moments when a partnership so successful, so iconic, simply comes to an end without warning. For 25 years, Phil Mickelson and Jim Bones Mackay were inseparable. Together they won 41 PGA Tour titles, 5 major championships, countless unforgettable moments. From Augusta to Muirfield, they stood side by side through victories, heartbreaks, and history. When they announced their split in 2017, fans were told it was mutual. Just a natural ending, a fresh start for both men. That explanation satisfied most people. But according to later reporting, there may have been much more happening behind the scenes. A financial dispute, years of growing frustration, broken promises, and one number that refuses to disappear: $900,000. If those reports are accurate, that figure represents money Jim Bones Mackay believed he was owed in unpaid FedEx Cup bonuses. Not a few missed paychecks, nearly $1 million. If true, it changes the way many people view one of golf's most famous breakups. Before we continue, tell us in the comments, does loyalty still exist in professional sports, or does money eventually destroy every partnership? And if you enjoy documentaries that go beyond the headlines to explore the real stories behind the biggest names in golf, make sure you subscribe. Because today's story is one of the most fascinating relationships the game has ever produced. Everything began in 1992. Phil Mickelson was only 22 years old, an amateur, a rising superstar from Arizona State, already a 3-time NCAA champion, and one of the brightest talents in American golf. Jim Mackay was 27. Originally born in England before moving to Florida as a child, he had worked for several tour professionals while trying to establish himself as a caddy. Their first assignment together came during U.S. Open qualifying in Memphis. Neither man knew much about the other. There were no long planning sessions, no practice rounds, only a few brief phone calls. Mackay later recalled that Mickelson simply arrived, greeted him, and said, "I'll see you on the first tee." That was it. Then came the golf. With nearly 80 players competing for only 16 places, Mickelson delivered one of the greatest qualifying performances Mackay had ever witnessed. He opened with a 69, then followed it with a stunning 62 that broke the course record. Mackay immediately realized he was witnessing something extraordinary. He would later joke that the hardest adjustment wasn't Phil's game. It was learning how to clean left-handed clubs. Not long before meeting Mickelson, Mackay had already received the nickname that would follow him for the rest of his career. During a tournament, Fred Couples couldn't remember his name. Trying to get his attention across the room, Couples simply shouted, "Bones!" The nickname stuck forever. Neither man could have imagined what would happen next. Over the next quarter century, they became one of the most successful player-caddie partnerships in golf history. 5 major championships, 41 PGA Tour victories, Ryder Cups, President's Cups, victories around the world. But success wasn't built only on talent. It was built on trust. Mickelson often described Bones as the one person on the golf course who wanted him to succeed as much as he did. The two families became incredibly close. Their wives were friends. Their children knew each other. The relationship extended far beyond tournament weeks. Bones wasn't simply carrying a golf bag. He became one of Phil's closest confidants. Their chemistry became legendary. In fact, they even had an unusual agreement. Once every year, Bones was allowed to overrule one of Phil's on-course decisions. That level of trust is almost unheard of in professional golf. At least, it used to be. But beneath the victories, small frustrations slowly began piling up. One of the strangest involved something most fans would never think about: flags. After every tournament victory, Mickelson kept the 18th hole flag. Originally, the tradition carried deep emotional meaning. After winning the 2004 Masters, shortly after his grandfather passed away, Phil framed the flag and presented it to his grandmother. It was a beautiful tribute. But the tradition never stopped. Win after win, major after major. Bones reportedly never received a single championship flag. Within caddy circles, keeping at least one victory flag is considered a meaningful tradition. Many caddies treasure them for life. According to people close to Mackay, the issue wasn't really about the flags themselves. It represented something larger. Recognition, respect, appreciation. Every time guests visited the Mackay's home during the Phoenix Open, they reportedly asked the same question. Where are all the flags? There weren't any. And over time, that reportedly became another source of quiet disappointment. Then came the financial issue. This is where the story becomes significantly more controversial. According to golf journalist Alan Shipnuck in his unauthorized biography of Phil Mickelson, Bones believed he had not been fully paid his agreed share of Mickelson's FedEx Cup bonuses over roughly a decade. Shipnuck reported that Mackay calculated the unpaid amount at approximately $900,000. Neither man has publicly detailed the private financial arrangements between them, but the allegation became one of the most discussed revelations in the book. The timing also mattered. During much of that period, Mickelson was reportedly dealing with enormous gambling losses, later examined during the federal insider trading investigation involving sports bettor Billy Walters. Although Mickelson earned tens of millions of dollars annually, those earnings were offset by enormous expenses, including homes, aircraft, employees, coaches, travel, and other financial commitments. According to Shipnuck's reporting, the pressure eventually reached Mackay. As tensions increased, Mickelson reportedly paid approximately $400,000 toward what Bones believed he was owed. But according to the book, the payment didn't resolve the issue. The relationship continued deteriorating. Money wasn't the only problem. Bones reportedly became increasingly frustrated that Phil ignored his advice more frequently. He was also irritated by repeated late arrivals after being instructed to reach the course much earlier. Individually, each issue may have seemed manageable. Together, they created years of accumulated resentment. Then, everything changed. In June 2017, the golf world learned that Phil Mickelson and Jim Bones Mackay were ending their partnership. Their official statements were remarkably gracious. Phil thanked Bones for 25 unforgettable years. Bones wished Phil nothing but future success. To the public, it appeared to be a respectful mutual decision. But according to Shipnuck's reporting, the reality was far more complicated. The book claims Mackay had already decided to end the relationship weeks earlier after finally reaching his breaking point. If true, it wasn't Phil dismissing Bones. It was Bones choosing to walk away. The announcement simply protected both men's reputations. Golf fans were stunned. Longtime tour caddy John Wood later compared the breakup to watching your own parents divorce. That's how inseparable they had become. According to Shipnuck, shortly after the split, Mickelson reportedly paid another $400,000 toward the disputed bonuses, bringing the total to approximately $800,000. He also sent Mackay several major championship flags from their greatest victories. But there was one unusual detail. Phil had signed the flags with oversized autographs. People close to Bones reportedly said he disliked the signatures because they distracted from the keepsakes themselves. The flags were never displayed in his home. Instead, according to the book, he intended to sell them one day and donate the proceeds to charity. If Shipnuck's figures are correct, roughly $100,000 of the original disputed amount remained unpaid. Since caddies generally work without formal employment contracts, there was little practical way to force payment. Everything had depended on trust. Once that trust disappeared, so did the partnership. After leaving Mickelson, Bones successfully reinvented himself. He became one of television's most respected golf analysts with NBC Sports and Golf Channel. Then, in 2021, he returned to caddying for Justin Thomas. The partnership immediately paid off. Together, they captured the 2022 PGA Championship. When they eventually parted ways in 2024, Thomas publicly thanked Bones for everything he had contributed. The respect between them appeared genuine. Phil's career followed a different path. His brother Tim took over caddy duties. In 2021, at the age of 50, Mickelson stunned the sporting world by becoming the oldest major champion in history with his victory at the PGA Championship. Soon afterward, he joined LIV Golf in one of the biggest moves the sport had ever seen. Despite everything that happened, there is one final chapter that complicates the story. Years later, speaking with Dan Patrick, Mickelson reflected on one of the darkest periods of his life, when his wife Amy was battling cancer. He recalled that the first person to arrive and support the family was Bones. That experience, Phil said, taught him the importance of simply showing up when people need you. Those words remind us that relationships are rarely simple. Friendship can exist alongside disappointment. Respect can survive even after trust has been damaged. Perhaps that is why this story still resonates today, because it isn't just about money, or flags, or unpaid bonuses. It's about what happens when one of the greatest partnerships in golf slowly begins to unravel. Whether Jim Bones Mackay was completely justified in leaving is something only he truly knows. But one thing is certain. The partnership between Phil Mickelson and Bones Mackay transformed professional golf. Its ending remains one of the sport's most fascinating and debated stories. Now we'd like to hear from you. If you were in Bones' position, would you have stayed or would you have walked away? Leave your thoughts below. And if you enjoy in-depth golf documentaries that separate fact from rumor and explore the stories behind the legends, subscribe to the channel, because the next story is already waiting.